a lot of demands for support, economic support. Our country was providing that with respect to their sovereignty. And just a price calculation for fuel, energy, the amount of loans, favorable interest rates, the total benefit to Ukraine from 91 to 1913 came to around $250 billion. But it's not all at all. By the end of 91, the debt of the USSR to the foreign countries and funds was around $100 billion. So initially, the idea was that those loans would be repaid by all the republics of the former Soviet Union, in solidarity and pro rata to their economic potential. However, Russia took upon itself the repayment of all the Soviet debt and completely repaid it. Finally, completed the process in 1917. In return, the newly created independent states, they should have given up part of their Soviet foreign assets, and there was an agreement in 94 signed with Ukraine. However, Kiev didn't ratify those agreements, and afterwards it simply refused to perform them, saying that they had the claims to the Diamond Fund and other assets of the former Soviet Union abroad. Nevertheless, despite the certain issues, Russia always cooperated with Ukraine openly, honestly, with respect to its interests. Our ties in most different regions were developed in 1991. Our turnover was more than $50 billion, and the trade of Ukraine with all other European Union countries in 19 until before the coronavirus was less than that. But it would leap in your eye that the Ukrainian authorities, they had to enjoy all the rights, but not to have any obligations. Instead of partnership, it was just begging for money, and it was just taking unprecedented form. The first blackmail in the fuel transit, and just plain theft of gas. They try to use the dialogue in Kiev as leverage for relationship with the West, trying to obtain more preferences, because they would say to the West that the Russian influence would grow, and the Ukrainian authorities, right from the first steps, they started building it on refuting everything, the historical memory of the whole generation inhabiting Ukraine. So it's no surprise that the Ukrainian society came across the high level of nationalism, and it turned into aggressive Russophobia, hating Russians, neo-Nazis, the bands, a lot of Ukrainians were in the North Caucasus, and the new demands were heard often to take parts of Russia, and through different NGOs and special services, they introduced their clients and promoted them through the government ranks. And Ukraine actually never had the tradition of their own former state, and from after 91 they just mechanically started to copy other structures which were far away from the Ukrainian realities. The political institutions would quickly be transformed to cater for the needs of the new clans and gangs, which had nothing to do with the interests of the Ukrainian people. The civil choice, European civil choice of the oligarchs' power was not to create better conditions for the people, but to severely provide services to the opposers of Russia, and to save the billions of dollars that they stole and hid in the Western banks. some industrial financial groups that supported by the politicians first were based on radicals. The other would promote the good relationship with Russia, multiculturalism, and so on. And they would come to power based on the votes of people who supported those ideas, including millions of southeast of Russia. But having received the position, they would act as a traitors to their voters, but the real policy was done by the radicals. Quite often persecuting their former followers. And having used people, law-abiding citizens of modern ideas who are used to trust to the power. They, unlike radicals, they would not show aggression or would turn to illegal actions. So the radicals became brazen. Their demands would grow from year to year, and it wasn't difficult for them to impose their will to the weak authorities who were affected by the corruption and nationalism virus. And they would substitute social, national, economic interests of the people and the real sovereignty of the Ukrainian people by speculating on the external arena. And the stable state has never been formed in Ukraine. Politically, the elective procedures is just a screen to divide the power and property between different oligarch clans. Corruption, which unfortunately, obviously, is an issue to many countries, including Russia. In Ukraine, it had a special feature. It just diluted the stateness, all the areas of state, and the radicals used the justified unhappiness of people. In '99, made the illegal coup d'etat to overthrow the government. According to the data, the material support of the protesters on the Independence Square from the U.S. Embassy was $1 million per day. And additional large amounts were transferred to the accounts of the leaders of the opposition to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars. And people who really suffered, how much did they get? People who died in the altercations in the Kiev's and other city squares. Well, you'd better not ask about that. So the radicals who grabbed the power, they instituted real terror and persecution of people who were against this unconstitutional. Public figures, they were treated with denigration, and the wave of crime went through the cities of Ukrainian cities, and the most horrible event in Odessa when the demonstrators were burned alive in the House of Trade Unions. The criminals who did that crime, they have not been punished. No one even looking for them, but we know them by names, and we'll do everything in order to punish them, to find and to bring them to court. Maidan hasn't brought Ukraine closer to democracy and progress. Having done that, the nationalist movements who supported them, they brought it to the dead end. They pushed Ukraine into this abyss of civil war. The country is split after 8 years. It's going through the sharp social and economic problems. According to the international organizations, almost 6 million people. I would like to reiterate, it's around 15% of the total population, not labor capable. They had to go abroad to look for a job, and quite often, or as a rule, to very low-paid, unqualified jobs. And there's another interesting fact. In 2020, during pandemic, thousands of health workers and doctors left the country. And from 2014, water rates went by one-third, and by many times for gas to households, by tenfold. People just don't have the money to pay for the gas and and electric, they just barely survive. Why did it happen? Why is it taking place? The answer is obvious, because everything they received from the Soviet Union, they lost everything, stole everything. They lost tens and hundreds of thousands of job places that provided stable income and taxes to the machine tool building, electronic industry, vessel building, aviation. They are either totally annihilated, but there were times when the whole Soviet Union was proud of them. They demolished the shipbuilding yard in Nikolaev, which was built by Catherine the Great, and Antonov hasn't produced a single plane. Yuzhmash, who produced missiles, is on the verge of bankruptcy, just like Kremenchuk Steel Lloyd, and this sad list can go on. And the gas transporting system, which was created by the whole Soviet Union, it has become so dilapidated that its operation has a lot of risks and high administrative costs. So here comes the question: poverty, loss of technical, industrial potential. Is this the European, Western, but democratic choice? They have been fooling people for years with that. And in actual fact, it all came to the fact that the dilapidation of the Ukrainian economic is just the poor robbery of the country, and the country itself is under the foreign external management. It's not just done by the orders from the Western capitals, but mainly even on the spot through advisors, NGOs who are right there. And they directly influence for the main personnel decisions, all the powers down to municipal, to main state companies and corporations, including the gas, railway, Ukrainian railway, postal, ports. There are no independent courts in Ukraine. It was all given to the representative of the international organization, who have the right to choose the Council of Justice and other institutions. And through the U.S. Embassy, the U.S. Embassy directly controls the National Agency for Corruption Prevention, Anti-Corruption Bureau, Special Anti-Corruption Procurator's Office, and it's all done through good ideas of fighting the corruption. Where are the results? The corruption has been flourishing and still flourishing, even more so. And all these administrative management methods, do the Ukrainians know that they are not even under the political protectorate, but it's just like a colony. And the privatization of the state, they call themselves patriots, but they lost their national character or feature, and is leading to the total loss of sovereignty of the country. They diversify and forcefully assimilate people. They rather in issues unlawful laws. That they've got the sort of indigenous people law now, Russians who would like to maintain their identity, language. They were told in no certain terms, that they're alien to this country. The laws on the functioning of the Ukrainian language as a state, they take away Russian from public schools, even from shops. The illustration, the cleaning of the authorities are allowed to kick out unfavorable representatives, and it's all done tough, and they suppress the freedom of speech, they persecute the opposition, and the world knows of this unilateral legal sanction against legal entities and countries. In Ukraine, they have outpassed their curators, and they issued sanctions against mass media, physical people, and members of Rada. And the Russian Orthodox Church is being persecuted, and it's not an emotional evaluation, it's the specific documents and decisions. The tragedy of a religious split has been turned into the instrument, political instrument, and the current government doesn't want to abolish the laws that discriminate people. They've registered new bills against the clergy and the representatives of the Russian Orthodox Church. I would like to speak separately about the Crimea. The inhabitants of the peninsula made their free choice to be together with Russia. It was final, clear will, and the Ukrainian authorities can't put anything against that will. Their actions is based on extremists, even Islamic extremists. Some sabotage groups are being introduced and aimed at they steal Russian citizens. We have direct evidence that such aggressive action is done with the support of the foreign special services. In March 2021, they introduced new military strategy. This document is totally dedicated to the opposition with Russia and in introducing the other countries, foreign countries, into our conflict with our country. The strategy wants to form the terrorist underground in Russia and in the Crimea, and it also has designed the framework of the supposed war. And the war should suppose, as they see it, the current powers that be strategies. I will cite them with the support of the international community under favorable terms to Ukraine. And also, as they say in Kiev, I also cite them. Listen carefully. With the military support by the world community in geopolitical juxtaposition with the Russian Federation. So basically, it's nothing less than preparation to the combat action against Russia. We also know that there have been statements that Ukraine wants to create its own nuclear weapon, and it's not just a hollow bravado. Ukraine still has, well, than Soviet missiles, aviation, and operational tactical missile units built by the USSR, and with a range of over 100 kilometers. They can increase it, it just will take time. So they have the things left from the Soviet times. And it will be much easier for them to develop tactical nuclear times than other countries, and I'm not going to name those countries who are developing such weapons, especially with the support from the West. And we shouldn't exclude that. If Ukraine has weapons of mass destruction to all countries and to us, Russia, the situation will change drastically. We cannot. We should react to that danger, and the Western mentors could facilitate Ukraine in that. We can see how military pumping is being done of the Kiev regime. The USA alone from 2014 spent billions of dollars, equipment, specialist training, and in the last months, it's just non-stop that weapons flow demonstratively to Ukraine. The special services and the military, they are headed by the foreign advisors. There've always been foreign units from NATO. The systems have been integrated, so the command chain of the armed forces of Ukraine, or even separate units, can be done from the NATO headquarters. The USA and NATO, they started to develop the Ukrainian territory as the military theater, and they all anti-Russian. Last year alone, more than 20,000 personnel and thousands of weapons, and now they have that they will allow multinational maneuvers next year. And obviously, first and foremost, they're talking about NATO units, and they've planned not less than 10 exercises like that. So such events is just they're hiding the increase of NATO in Ukraine and the modernized, upgraded by Americans, the Borispol, Chuguev, Odessa airdromes. They can take units within very short time. The open space of Ukraine is open for reconnaissance, drones which are used to spy on Russia. And I would like to add that the Center of Naval Operations Nachakov, built by Americans, facilitates the operation of the NATO vessels and use weapons against Russia and the Black Sea, Russian units. There were times when the Americans wanted to create such facilities in the Crimea, but the inhabitants of Sevastopol and the Crimeans, they destroyed those places. But such a center already operates in Achakov. And in the 18th century, Suvorov soldiers fought for that city, and due to their nobility, it became part of Russia. And in that, the Black Sea lands were joined with Russia after the wars with the Ottoman Empire, and they were called Novorossiya, New Russia. And then the names of the national military leaders, without whose efforts Ukraine wouldn't have many large cities and access to the Black Sea. And in Poltava, quite recently, they brought down the monument to Alexander Suvorov. What else can you say? You are giving up on your own past, on your colonial past of the Russian Empire. Then we'll follow the same rules everywhere. And I would like to say that Article 17 of the Ukrainian Constitution doesn't allow to build foreign military bases or units in Ukraine, but this is just a mere thing which can be easily avoided. There are training military NATO centers, and there basically are foreign military bases. They just call it a mission, and the Kiev has announced the strategic course of joining NATO, and then after each country has the right to choose its own security protection to enter into military treaties, and would be basic, but according to the international documents, the security is joint and indivisible, so you can't build your security with a detriment to the security of other countries. And also the Charter of the European Security of 1999 adopted in Istanbul, and Astana Declaration. So the way you build your security shouldn't create threat to other nations. And Ukraine joining NATO, it's direct threat to the security of Russia. I'd like to reiterate that in April 2008, in Bucharest summit of NATO, the U.S. forced the decision that Ukraine and Georgia will become NATO members. And the European allies of the USA, they knew only all too well the risk of that, but they had to give in to the will of the senior partner. The Americans just use them to carry out clearly cut anti-Russian policy, and now they are quite skeptical about Ukraine appearing in NATO. And from some European capitals, we get a signal that said, "Oh, it will not happen tomorrow," and our American partners say say that is okay. Say we not tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. What does it change in the historic perspective? And absolutely nothing. Even more so, we know the position and the words of the Russian leaders that the active war action in the east of Russia does not preclude their joining to NATO if they in line with the requirements and if they fight corruption. And time and again we are being persuaded that NATO is peace-loving, defensive union, no threat to Russia. And now they ask us to believe their word again. But the real price of those words we know only too well. In 1990, when the issue of the unification of Germany was discussed, the German leadership did promise that there will be no extension of the military presence, not an inch in the eastern direction, and the unification of Germany will not lead to the propagation of the military to the West NATO of NATO. Those were just verbal sounds, mere sound. Then we was being persuaded that when the countries to the east of Germany, if they join NATO, it will take their historical fears. It will create more friendly towards Russia countries. It turned out quite the opposite. Some of the Eastern European countries selling their stereotypes and Russophobic, they insist on increasing the defense potential, and it should be aimed at Russia first and foremost. And it was taking place in the 90s and the 2000s when Russia was open and goodwill and our relationship with the West were at a high level. Russia has performed all its obligations, removed troops from Germany, East Germany and East and Central Europe overcame the consequence of the Cold War. We constantly offered various options for cooperation in NATO, in OECD, and in European Parliament. And I will say now what I've never said publicly. This is the first time I'm saying it. In the 2000, during the visit of the living president of the US, Bill Clinton, who was leaving his position, I asked him, how would America think about taking Russia into NATO? I will not disclose all the details of that conversation, but the reaction externally looked very conservative, very reserved. But what was the real attitude of the Americans to that option? You can see through their actions, support of the terrorists in the Northern Caucasus, ignoring our concern about our security, expansion of NATO, leaving the various security agreements. And I'm just tempted to ask, why? What for? Okay, if you don't want to see us as friends or as an ally, so why do you make an enemy out of us? The answer is only one. It's nothing to do with our political regime or anything else. They just don't need such a huge independent country as Russia. That's the answer to all questions. That is the source of the traditional American policy in Russian direction. And that's where the attitude of all our security proposals comes from. You take just a single look at the map, how the Western countries followed their word not to expand, just lied, swindled, and we had 5 ways of NATO expansion. 99 accepted Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary in 2004, Bulgaria, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Albania, Croatia, Montenegro, North Macedonia. So as a result, the NATO's infrastructure came directly to the Russian borders, and that's behind one of the security crises in Europe. It affected negatively all security systems. We lost mutual respect. The situation is degrading in Romania and Poland. You know, when anti-missile, they are establishing missile areas. It is well known that the missile units located there can be used for tomahawks. It's offensive systems, and the USA is developing the Universal Standard 6, which together with the air defense and anti-missile defense can hit water and surface strike. So they're expanding their air defense system, and they're getting new offensive capabilities. According to the information we have, the joining of Ukraine in NATO and building the NATO infrastructure is almost done deal. It's just a matter of time. We understand clearly that under that scenario, the level of military threats to Russia will go up drastically by several times, and it will increase a sudden blow. The American documents of strategic planning, the document of strategic planning, Americans, they have the preventive strike against the missile complexes of, and who's the main enemy or adversary of the United States? It's Russia. The NATO documents, officially, we are declared the main threat of the NATO security. As the main citadel, Ukraine will be acting as a main citadel for that. If our predecessors heard about that, they would not believe their ears, and we do not want to believe it nowadays. But this is so. And I would like it to understand in Russia and in Ukraine. Many Ukrainian aerodromes are not from our borders, so the tactical NATO aviation, including high-precision weapons, will hit until Volgograd, Kazan, Samara, Astrakhan level, and the development of radio location will allow NATO to control our airspace until the Urals. And when we, the medium and short-range medium nucleus, the USA left, they've developed several surface systems, including ballistic system that could hit up the targets 5,500 kilometers. So if such systems are included Ukraine, they will be able to hit any target in the European territory of Russia and be behind the Urals. And the time for a Tomahawk will be less than 35 minutes to hit Moscow. From Kharkov, 7-8 minutes, and hypersonic 4-5 minutes. It's like having a knife to your throat, and they want to implement those plans, just like they did in the last years by expanding NATO to the east, expanding the military equipment and infrastructure, ignoring our protest warnings, our interest. They just spat at it, did whatever they liked, and of course they want to behave the same way. It's like when the dog barks, the caravan still goes on. We didn't agree to that and will never agree to that. And Russia is always to solve the most difficult issues through the political and diplomatic methods at the negotiating table. We understand our global responsibility was to be as early back as 2007. We put forward the initiative for the European security. The essence was, so not a single state, not a single international state in the North Atlantic cannot improve their security by through the detriment to the other country. But they kicked it out, our proposition, straight away. They said, no, you can't limit the activities of the NATO countries. And they also said that the legally binding security can be had only by the member members of NATO. In December last year, we gave to the Western partners the draft agreement between the Russian Federation, the USA on the security guarantees and the measures for ensuring the security interests of Russia and NATO members, European. In the response, there were a lot of words, but there were some rational things, but only second-rate things. And so they wanted just to do a lip service and to put it aside, and we reacted in a certain way. We said that we are still keen on following the negotiations, but everything will be looked at in its togetherness, and they have three key points. First is no more expansion of NATO, refusal of strike systems at the Russian borders, and to bring back the infrastructure and potential of NATO to the state of '97, when the main act, Russia-NATO, was signed. So these principal offers have been ignored. Our Western partners, again, stated their tried words that every country has a free right to choose their form of security and can join any alliances and unions. And in their position, nothing has changed. So it's still the same reference to the famous policy of NATO of open doors. We are being blackmailed. They are threatening us with sanctions. I think they will still introduce those sanctions as the sovereignty and our military force grows. And the new pretext, they will always be found for new or fabricated, irrespective of the situation in Ukraine. The purpose is single: to put back Russia, not to let it develop. And they will do it as before, even without any formal pretext, just because we exist. We will never give up our sovereignty, national interest, and our values. I would like clearly state directly that in the situation when our suggestions didn't get any answers from NATO and the threat to our country is growing significantly, Russia has all the rights to take responsive measures and decisions, and this is how we will act. As far as the situations of the things in Donbass, we see that the ruling few in Kiev keep saying about they do not want to comply with the Minsk agreement. On the contrary, they're trying to organize a blitzkrieg, the lightning war in Donbass, like it was in 2014 and 15. You know how those adventures ended. Now, there's not a single day without shelling of the towns. They've created huge units, heavy machinery, artillery, salvo systems, killing local people, blockade, including people, old people, children. As we say, you can't see even the end to it. But the civilized world, the so-called civilized world, the only representatives, the self-proclaimed Western colleagues, they do not notice anything, as if nothing happens, nothing exists. This nightmare, this genocide that almost 4 million people are subjected to, only because those people didn't agree with the coup d'etat supported by the West in 2014 and went against the state movement towards nationalism, aggressive nationalism and neo-Nazism, and they're fighting for their basic rights of people on this world to speak their own language and maintain their traditions. How long can it go for? How long can we stand before and just look at that? We've done everything to maintain the territorial sovereignty of Ukraine. We've been fighting for the UN 2017 resolution from the September, which fixed the Minsk agreements of 2015. It didn't produce anything. The new presidents come, members of Rada, but the radical, aggressive, nationalistic attitude of the regime that usurped the power in Russia doesn't change. They totally overthrown everything, and they went a legal way, used force, threats, and they do not recognize any possibility to solve the issue of Donbass without military option. So in that connection, I believe to take the decision that has been asked to be made for a long time, to recognize the independence of Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics. I would like the Federal Union to support and then ratify the agreement between peacekeeping and support between the countries. And these documents will be signed as soon as possible. And those who usurped and maintains power in Kiev, we demand to stop the military action straight away. Otherwise, all responsibility for possible bloodshed that continues will be totally blamed on the rulers of the regime in Ukraine. I state about the decisions passed today, and I'm sure the national forces and the citizens of Russia will support it. Thank you for your attention. Hello.
Начинается церемония подписания документов.
The ceremony of the documents signing is being carried out. The President of Russia, President Putin, signs the recognition of Donetsk People's Republic. The President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, signs the decree of the President of the Russian Declaration of recognition of Lugansk People's Republic.
Президент Российской Федерации
The President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, and the heads of the Donetsk peoples, Denis Pushilin, signed the agreement about cooperation and mutual assistance and peace between the Russian Federation and Donetsk People's Republic.
Президент Российской Федерации
The President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, and the head of the Lugansk People's Republic, Mr. Pasechnik, signed the agreement of friendship, mutual cooperation and assistance between the Russian Federation and the Lugansk People's Republic.
Церемония подписания документов завершена. Церемония подписания
The ceremony of signing the documents has been completed. Congratulations.
This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service.